Your motivation is not dying by accident. You have felt this pattern too many times. A strong start, a burst of energy, a few days of focus, then the drop, the delay, the guilt, the quiet frustration of watching yourself fall away from your own standards again. The hidden enemy is not weakness, it is dependence on extrinsic fuel. You have been trying to run your life on reward urgency, comparison, and fear. That kind of fuel burns hot, but it burns dirty. It creates motion, then emptiness. In this audiobook, we are going to examine the real structure behind unstable drive and why lasting motivation is built differently. Not by more shame, not by louder pressure, by understanding the inner motivators that make difficult work easier to begin and easier to sustain. This is the shift from chasing short bursts to building a deeper engine, from emotional restarts to durable inner drive. Stay with me, because this is where inconsistency stops being a mystery and starts becoming a system you can change. Chapter 1. You are not lazy. You need to stop calling yourself lazy. Stop now. That word has stolen too much from you already. It has made you misread your struggle. It has made you turn a broken system into a broken identity. It has made you believe your problem is character when your real problem is fuel. You know this pain. You know what it feels like to see the work make the plan promise yourself that this time will be different and still drift away from the very thing you said mattered. You know what it feels like to start hard. Feel strong for a moment and then disappear from your own standards. And every time it happens, the label comes back. Lazy, weak, undisciplined, not serious enough. But that label explains nothing. It is too crude, too shallow, too easy. It does not explain why you can be intense one day and numb the next. It does not explain why you can care deeply and still avoid the work. It does not explain why you can want more for your life and still fail to move when the moment comes. A pattern this unstable is not just a moral problem. It is a mechanical problem. It is a system problem. It is a fuel problem. That matters because the way you name the problem decides the way you try to solve it. If you think the issue is laziness, you will try to shame yourself into action. You will tighten harder, push harder, judge harder. You will keep trying to beat movement out of yourself. And for a few days it may work. Pressure can create motion. Fear can create motion. Self-hatred can create motion. But none of them can create a clean, durable engine. They create friction, not strength. They create bursts, not consistency. They make you move while quietly draining your will to continue. Then the crash comes. Then the guilt comes. Then the self-attack comes. And then you make the same mistake again. You think you need more force when what you really need is a better explanation. Listen carefully. You are not failing because you do not care. You are failing because the way you have been trying to move your life depends on the wrong source of energy. You have been trying to build a meaningful life on unstable motivation. You have been trying to create lasting output from a system that was never built to last. That is why your effort feels heavy. That is why your progress feels inconsistent. That is why every restart feels emotional instead of structural. You do not need more guilt. You need a better diagnosis. You do not need another insult. You need language that tells the truth. The truth is not that you are useless. The truth is that your drive has been wired to the wrong inputs. You have been waiting for urgency, praise, pressure, panic, comparison, or fear to wake you up. So of course your rhythm keeps breaking. A life cannot stay strong when its engine runs only on emotional emergencies. Stop turning this into a question of worth. Stop making your struggle mean something final about who you are. Your worth is not on trial here. Your system is. And that is good news because a system can be rebuilt. A system can be redesigned. A system can be trained to serve you instead of betray you. This is where the whole book begins, not with blame, not with excuses, with accuracy. You are not lazy. You are using the wrong fuel. And if the fuel is wrong, no amount of ambition can carry you for long. Get that into your mind. Hold it there. Because you cannot solve a problem you keep naming incorrectly. You do not need more shame. You need to see clearly. You need to think clearly. You need to stop attacking yourself and start studying the engine that has been driving your life. That is the shift. That is the first win. Name the problem right, then fix it right. Chapter 2. Why motivation keeps dying. Now, you need to understand why your motivation rises fast and dies just as fast. The cycle is not random. It is not mysterious. It is the natural result of living on extrinsic fuel. You see a big goal. You imagine the result. More money, more respect, better status, a body that gets attention, work that impresses people, a life that looks powerful from the outside. You feel a rush. You feel a spike. You feel ready. For a few days, maybe a few weeks, you attack. You work harder. You push more. You feel locked in. Then something shifts. The excitement drops. The pressure gets heavier. The distance between where you are and where you want to be starts to feel longer. The work stops feeling charged. The reward is still out there, but today you cannot touch it. So your energy falls. Your attention breaks. Your standards slip. Then guilt arrives right on schedule. You tell yourself you were never serious. You tell yourself you always do this. And then when the pain gets loud enough, you look for another burst to start again. That is the cycle. Hype, action, friction, collapse, guilt, restart, hype again. It feels like a discipline problem, but it is deeper than that. It is a fuel problem. Extrinsic motivation can spark action, but it cannot carry deep work for long because it keeps your mind tied to what is outside you. It teaches you to ask, what do I get? How fast will I get it? Who will notice, am I ahead yet? Am I winning yet? That sounds useful, but it comes with poison, anxiety, comparison, restlessness, emptiness after the high. When your motivation depends on reward, your peace depends on reward too. When your motivation depends on approval, your focus depends on approval too. When your motivation depends on fear, you may move, but you will move under tension, not power. That kind of energy is expensive. It burns hot and dirty. It creates action, but it also creates emotional debt. That is why success often does not calm people who live this way. It only trains them to chase the next signal. They hit one target and immediately need another. They reach one level and instantly fear losing it. They win one round and still do not feel safe, because extrinsic fuel does not satisfy for long. It stimulates, then withdraws. It promises relief, then creates new hunger. It tells you the next result will finally settle you down, but it never does. It just moves the finish line and keeps your nervous system on edge. Do not misunderstand this. Wanting success is not the problem. Ambition is not the problem. Results matter. Money matters. Recognition can matter. But when those things become your main engine, your motivation becomes fragile by design. You become dependent on conditions you do not fully control. You become powerful only when the outside world feeds you a reason. That is not freedom. That is dependence dressed up as drive. And dependence always breaks under pressure. That is why your motivation keeps dying. Not because you do not want it badly enough. Not because you are incapable of consistency. It dies because the fuel you are burning was never built for the long road. You are trying to run your life on applause, urgency, fear, and reward. That engine will always overheat. That engine will always leave you empty after the rush. So stop being surprised by the crash. Learn from it. Read it correctly. Your fire is not gone. You have just been feeding it the wrong thing. And if you keep feeding it the wrong thing, the same pattern will keep owning you. Break the pattern. Change the fuel. Chapter 3. The fuel that actually lasts. So what is the fuel that actually lasts? It is intrinsic motivation. Not fantasy, not soft passion talk, not pretending every hard thing should feel easy. Intrinsic motivation is the inward pull that brings you back to meaningful work, because something inside that work is feeding you, shaping you, deepening you, and calling you forward. It is not just about the prize at the end. It is about the quality of the path itself. It is about the fact that work can become a place where your mind wakes up, your skill grows, your effort means something, your choices feel like yours, and your life stops feeling like a constant negotiation with your own resistance. That is the difference. Extrinsic motivation asks, "What will I get?" Intrinsic motivation asks, "What in this work pulls me in? Where am I growing? Why does this matter? How does this connect to who I want to become? Does this feel owned by me or borrowed from someone else's script?" Those are stronger questions, cleaner questions, more durable questions, because they do not require daily applause to keep you moving. They do not require a reward every hour. They do not demand that life flatter you before you show up. Intrinsic fuel works differently. It builds a relationship between you and the work itself. That relationship changes everything. When the work contains curiosity, you want to know more. When it contains mastery, you want to get better. When the work itself feels rewarding, effort stops feeling like pure delay. When it contains purpose, your effort feels connected to something larger than mood. When it contains autonomy, your nervous system stops feeling trapped and starts feeling responsible. These are the 5 levers: curiosity, mastery, intrinsic enjoyment of the work, purpose, autonomy. Now, the work is no longer just a transaction. It becomes a place of expansion, a place of identity, a place where showing up gives something back to you while you are still on the way. That is why intrinsic motivation lasts longer. Not because it is always intense, but because it is renewable. It does not need to shout every day. It can pull quietly, steadily, deeply. It lowers the feeling of internal force. It reduces the need to drag yourself. It makes hard work feel less like punishment and more like alignment. That matters more than most people understand. Because if you want to do difficult things for years, you cannot rely on intensity alone. You need a system that keeps feeding commitment when excitement is low. You need a structure that helps you come back when emotion is flat. You need a way of working that does not collapse the second praise disappears. That is what intrinsic motivation offers. And here is the most important part. It is not vague. It is not magical. It is not something a lucky few are born with. It has parts. It has levers. It can be examined. It can be strengthened. It can be built with intention. You do not have to wait for inspiration to visit you. You do not have to keep begging your feelings to cooperate. You can redesign your motivation the way you would redesign a machine that keeps failing under load. That is the promise now. You can stop living on unstable emotional spikes. You can build inward pull. You can create a deeper engine. You can become someone who does not need to be rescued by mood every time hard work begins. But first, you must accept the rule. You cannot build a strong life on weak fuel. You cannot do meaningful work for the long term while depending only on reward from the outside. That road will keep exhausting you, so choose better. Build deeper. Stop asking how to force yourself more. Start asking how to create work that pulls you back from within. That is the fuel that lasts. That is the engine you need. And that is where real drive begins. Chapter 4. Curiosity. When your mind wants more. You need to stop treating curiosity like a bonus emotion. It is not decoration. It is not childish. It is not something small you enjoy on weekends after the serious work is done. Curiosity is one of the clearest signs that your mind has found a direction worth moving toward. It is the feeling that says there is more here, and I need to see it. It is the pull that makes you read one more page, watch one more explanation test, one more idea, ask one more question, and stay with a problem longer than you were forced to. That matters because attention is never random for long. Your mind drifts toward what stimulates it, rewards it, and gives it something alive to work with. So when your attention keeps returning to a subject, a skill, a field, or a problem, do not dismiss that too quickly. Study it. There may be a clue there. There may be fuel there. There may be a future there. Most people make a costly mistake here. They think curiosity is weak because it does not always arrive with drama. It does not shout the way fear shouts. It does not pressure the way deadlines pressure. It does not seduce the way money seduces. Curiosity often feels quieter than those forces. But quiet is not the same as weak. Curiosity can hold attention for hours without violence. Curiosity can make effort feel lighter without making effort small. Curiosity can pull you into work before discipline even has to push. That is power. Real power. The kind of power that reduces friction before the fight even begins. You have felt this before. There are things you had to force yourself to do, and there are things you kept going back to even when nobody asked you to. There were subjects that woke your mind up. There were problems that made you want to dig deeper. There were moments when you did not just want the result. You wanted to understand. You wanted to see the mechanism. You wanted to test your own thinking against reality. That is curiosity. It is not just liking something. It is not just being entertained. It is the urge to close the gap between what you know and what you could know. It is the tension between ignorance and discovery. And when that tension is strong, attention sharpens. But be careful. Not all curiosity is equal. Surface curiosity is cheap. It jumps from clip to clip, tip to tip, idea to idea, and never builds anything. It feels stimulating, but it creates no depth. It is often just dopamine wearing the costume of learning. Real curiosity is different. Real curiosity makes you stay. It makes you return. It makes you test. Apply, compare, refine, and go deeper than convenience. It does not just ask what is interesting. It asks what matters here, what works here, what have I not understood yet, what can I do with this? That is the kind of curiosity that can support serious work. That is the kind you want. If your curiosity has been weak lately, do not rush to conclude that you have lost your edge. Many people do not lose curiosity. They bury it under dead work, vague learning, and delayed feedback. The mind wants movement. The mind wants signal. The mind wants to see that effort leads somewhere. When learning feels abstract, slow, disconnected, or useless, curiosity falls. Not because your mind is broken, but because the design is poor. If you want curiosity back, you need to redesign the learning experience. Learn things with leverage. Learn things that change what you can do. Learn things that connect to real problems. Learn things you can apply quickly. Give your brain proof that this path matters. Feedback matters here more than most people realize. When you learn something and can use it quickly, the mind pays attention. When effort produces a visible shift, curiosity strengthens. The brain starts to believe this is worth returning to. That is why vague consumption is so dangerous. It gives motion without consequence. It fills time but starves direction. You finish with stimulation, not traction. Curiosity grows when learning becomes active, not passive. So stop collecting information and calling it progress. Test it, use it, break it, improve it, turn knowledge into contact with reality. You also need to notice what keeps pulling your mind back when nobody is watching. What do you read about without being told? What problems do you naturally want to solve? What conversations keep waking you up? What kind of work makes you ask better questions instead of just counting minutes? Do not ignore those patterns. They are telling you something. Maybe not your entire destiny, maybe not your final answer, but they are telling you where your attention comes alive. And where your attention comes alive, motivation has a better chance to become durable. This is not permission to chase every shiny thing. Discipline still matters. Commitment still matters. But discipline works better when it is joined by inner pull. You do not need a life built only on pressure. You do not need to drag your mind across every mile. You need to build work that gives the mind a reason to lean in. Curiosity is one of those reasons. It is one of the first signs that the work is becoming more than a burden. It is becoming a field of discovery. And when your mind starts wanting more, the struggle changes. You do not just fight to stay in the room. You start wanting to stay in the room. That is a major shift. Do not underestimate it. Follow the signal. Protect the spark. Feed the part of your mind that wants to know more. Chapter 5. Mastery, the need to get better. Curiosity can pull you into the work, but mastery keeps you there. You need to understand this. Human beings do not just want pleasure. At your best, you also want progress. You want to feel that you are getting sharper, stronger, cleaner, more capable. You want to feel that your effort is changing what you can do. That is why mastery matters. It is the need to get better at something that matters. Not once, not for show, over and over again, across time, across struggle, across resistance. Mastery turns effort into development. It gives pain a direction. It gives repetition a point. A lot of people lose motivation because they are trapped in work that does not let them feel progress. They repeat the same level. They perform without improving. They stay busy without getting stronger. That kills drive. Of course it does. The mind can tolerate difficulty far longer than it can tolerate stagnation. Hard work can feel meaningful. Pointless work cannot. Challenge can wake you up. Flat repetition can numb you. So when you say you are losing motivation, sometimes the truth is simpler than you think. You are not being stretched in a way that lets you grow. You are not building visible capability. You are spending effort without feeling expansion. No strong mind wants to live there for long. Mastery changes that because it gives you an infinite horizon of improvement. There is always another level, another layer, another refinement, another weakness to clean up, another skill to sharpen, another standard to rise into. That matters because motivation lasts longer when the road keeps opening instead of closing. When you feel there is more strength available, more precision available, more excellence, available effort becomes an investment instead of a tax. You are no longer just surviving tasks, you are building yourself through them. This is why shallow goals fail so often. A shallow goal says, I just want to finish. A deeper goal says, I want to become dangerous at this. I want to become reliable at this. I want to become someone who can do this under pressure, under boredom, under doubt, and still stay precise. That second goal has more fuel in it because it is tied to identity growth and standards. It does not end the second you cross one line. It keeps calling you upward. That is the energy of mastery. It does not depend only on applause. It depends on the private satisfaction of seeing yourself improve in a real way. But mastery needs the right conditions. You cannot just say you want to get better and hope vague effort will take care of the rest. Improvement requires structure, specific drills, clear feedback, a challenge level that is not so low it bores you and not so high it crushes you. You need to know what you are practicing, why you are practicing it, and how you will know whether you improved. Otherwise, you do not have mastery. You have motion without measurement. And motion without measurement quickly becomes emotional guesswork. Think about the difference between saying, I want to become better at writing, and saying, I want to write sharper openings, cleaner transitions, stronger endings, and more controlled rhythm in the next 30 days. The second one creates traction. It gives you a target for your attention. It lets you see progress. It turns ambition into training. Your mind responds to that. It starts to believe that showing up has a point. That belief matters. Motivation grows when effort is connected to visible development. You also need to choose skills with a high ceiling. Do not only build what gets quick praise. Build what can keep making you better for years. Build what deepens your craft. Build what expands your power. Build what compounds. Because mastery is most energizing when the skill matters. If you are grinding at something small, narrow, and dead, the mind will resist. But when the skill opens, doors, sharpens identity, and raises your standard, the energy changes. You are no longer doing random work. You are building an instrument. You are building yourself into someone more capable than you were yesterday. There is another reason mastery matters. It gives you a cleaner relationship with difficulty. When you care about mastery, difficulty stops looking only like punishment. It starts to look like instruction. Friction becomes information. Failure becomes data. Weakness becomes a map. That is a powerful mental shift. It is one of the shifts that separates emotional workers from durable workers. Emotional workers take struggle personally. Durable workers use struggle strategically. They ask, what is this showing me? What skill is not ready yet? What must be trained? That mindset turns resistance into part of the path instead of proof that you should quit. Do not miss this. Mastery is not perfectionism. Perfectionism is fragile. It wants to look good now. Mastery is stronger. It is willing to look rough while getting better. Perfectionism is obsessed with impression. Mastery is obsessed with growth. Perfectionism gets humiliated by mistakes. Mastery uses mistakes. That is why mastery can fuel long-term effort and perfectionism cannot. One deepens commitment. The other poisons it. So if your motivation has been unstable, ask yourself a harder question. Are you just working, or are you actually getting better? Are you measuring progress or just surviving time? Are you training a real skill or only repeating a tired routine? If your work is not connected to development, your drive will struggle. Fix that. Choose a skill worth growing. Break it into parts. Practice on purpose. Track the change. Raise the challenge as you rise. Stop settling for activity without advancement. You do not just need more effort. You need effort that makes you stronger. People fight harder for work that is turning them into something greater. Build that kind of work. Then, show up again. Chapter 6. Love the work, not just the dream. This chapter is where you need to get brutally honest. Many people do not love the work. They love the image of the work. They love the title, the identity, the praise, the lifestyle, the money, the freedom, the respect, the story. They can tell about themselves. They love what the work seems to promise from the outside. But when it is time to sit down and do the actual thing, they disappear. Why? Because they were never attached to the process. They were attached to the fantasy. And fantasy is weak fuel for a long road. That is why this chapter matters so much. If you want durable drive, you must learn to love the work at the level of action, not just the dream at the level of image. This is what autotelicity means. It means the activity itself becomes part of the reward. Not every second, not every day, but enough that the process stops feeling like pure sacrifice and starts carrying life inside it. That is why autotelicity matters so much. It is not a decorative idea. It is one of the central conditions of flow. If the work itself never becomes rewarding, then every step before the outcome will feel like delay. Every repetition will feel like a tax. Every difficult hour will feel like something you endure just to get somewhere else. That is not sustainable. You can see this all the time. People say they want to be writers, but they do not love revising sentences. They say they want to be fit, but they do not love training. They say they want to build a business, but they do not love solving problems, selling learning, and carrying uncertainty. They say they want a respected craft, but they do not love the drills that create the craft. So they keep falling in love with results that can only be reached through activities they secretly resent. That creates permanent friction. That creates an identity split. Part of them wants the destination. Another part keeps resisting the road. When that split stays unresolved, motivation keeps leaking out. This does not mean the work has to feel easy. It does not mean you need to enjoy every task. It does not mean real work stops being work. Throw that childish idea away. The point is deeper than that. The point is that if you are on the right road, there should be something in the core activity that your system can gradually bond with. Something in the making, solving, building, exploring, refining, or performing that starts to feel alive. Something that lets you enter the task instead of merely endure it. Something that makes the process itself contain meaning, absorption, and engagement. That is what changes the game. When autotelicity is low, you live with one pattern. You are always waiting for later. Later when the result comes. Later when the praise comes. Later when the numbers rise. Later when the recognition arrives. So the present moment of labor never feels valuable on its own. It feels like a tunnel. A tunnel is tolerable for a while, but not for years. Not for a serious life. A serious life needs more than delayed gratification. It needs real engagement with the actual craft. Otherwise, the road keeps feeling like punishment, and eventually your mind rebels. You need to ask yourself a hard question now. Do you actually love the central moves of this path, not the costume, not the headline, not the applause? the central moves. Do you love studying the material, shaping the thing, solving the problem, refining the skill, facing the blank page, testing the idea, carrying the discipline, doing the repetitions? Because if the answer is no, then you need clarity. Maybe you are weak at the work and need to get stronger, which is fixable. Or maybe the path itself is misaligned, which is a different problem. Do not confuse those two. Sometimes you hate a task because you are still clumsy. As skill rises, engagement rises. But sometimes you hate a task because the work is not truly yours. That distinction matters. One way to raise autotelicity is to move your work closer to your strengths. Strength matters because people become more absorbed when they work in zones where their natural wiring and trained ability can meet. Another way is to notice which parts of the work make you forget time. Where do you feel more present, more alive, more immersed? Those moments matter. They show where the process itself has a grip on you. Build around that. Increase the ratio of time spent in those core actions whenever possible. Reduce dead weight where you can. Do not only optimize for efficiency, optimize for engagement with the real craft. And let me say this clearly. Dreaming about the result will never be enough. The dream can start you, but it cannot carry you forever. Long-term labor requires a deeper bond. It requires that the process itself becomes a place where you can live with some intensity and some meaning. If you never learn to love the actual work, the dream will keep feeling farther away every month. Then resentment grows, then avoidance grows, then tilt grows, and soon you are back where you started, calling yourself undisciplined, when the deeper problem is that you were trying to build a life on a fantasy bond instead of a process bond. So stop worshiping outcomes from a distance. Step closer. Look at the daily actions. Look at the real labor. Look at the activity that fills the hours. That is the truth of the path. That is what your life will actually be made of. And if you want durable drive, you need more than admiration for the destination. You need growing respect for the process. You need to find the part of the work that can hold your attention, sharpen your mind, and make the effort itself feel worth entering. Do not only want the life the work promises. Want the work. Let the work itself become rewarding. That is where endurance gets lighter. That is where flow begins to have somewhere to land. That is where the road stops being something you merely survive and starts becoming something you can truly inhabit. Chapter 7. Why Meaning and Freedom Change Everything. By now you can see the pattern. Curiosity pulls the mind in. Mastery gives growth a direction. Love of the work makes the activity itself more alive. But even that is not enough if two deeper forces are missing: meaning and freedom, purpose and autonomy. You need both. Work becomes dramatically stronger when it feels connected to something that matters and when it feels like it is truly yours to carry. Without meaning, effort feels empty. Without freedom, effort feels forced. Empty and forced is a terrible combination. No one can live there well for long. Let us start with meaning. Purpose is what answers the question. Why does this matter beyond the immediate task? Why does this deserve my energy, my focus, my years? What is this building? Who does this serve? What kind of life is this helping me create? Meaning lifts labor out of the level of isolated tasks and connects it to a larger mission. That matters because people can carry more weight when the weight means something. They can suffer more cleanly when the suffering serves a direction. They can stay steadier when the effort is tied to a purpose bigger than the mood of the day. Think about the difference between doing a task because it is on a list and doing that same task because it is part of building a life you respect. The task may look identical from the outside, but inwardly it changes. One feels like compliance, the other feels like contribution. One drains you faster, the other gives the effort dignity. Human beings do not only need stimulation, they need significance. They need to feel that what they are carrying is not random, that it matters, that it belongs to a mission, a standard, a responsibility, a contribution greater than immediate comfort. This is why people often collapse when success becomes their only purpose. Success is too thin. It can drive you for a season, but it often cannot carry the soul for a lifetime. When things get hard, you need a deeper answer than more money, more status, or more validation. You need a reason that keeps standing when applause disappears. Maybe your work is part of building a better future for your family. Maybe it is part of serving people well. Maybe it is part of becoming someone you can respect in private. Maybe it is part of refusing a wasted life. Whatever it is, it must be real. Borrowed purpose will not hold. Socially approved purpose will not hold. You need language your own nervous system believes. Now, let us talk about freedom. Autonomy matters because people do not want to feel like prisoners inside their own effort. You can have meaningful work and still resist it if it feels imposed, controlled, micromanaged, and disconnected from your agency. The mind wants ownership. It wants room to choose, shape, decide, and claim responsibility. This does not mean full independence all the time. Most people do not control every condition, but even inside constraints, freedom can grow. You can reclaim it through decisions about method, order, schedule, standard pace, style, priorities, and personal rules. Freedom is not always the absence of limits. Often it is the presence of agency inside limits. That difference is huge. When work feels like it is happening to you, resistance rises. When work feels like something you are choosing to carry, energy changes. The external task may stay the same, but the internal relationship becomes stronger. Ownership increases focus. Ownership increases pride. Ownership reduces the feeling of being dragged. This is why autonomy is such a powerful motivator. It lets you say, "This is my path. This is my standard. This is my process. I am not just obeying. I am building." Put purpose and autonomy together, and something important happens. Work stops feeling like random suffering under someone else's script. It starts feeling like meaningful effort inside your own chosen direction. That is one of the strongest forms of fuel you can build, because now you are not only curious, not only improving, not only enjoying parts of the process. Now you know why the work matters, and you feel some rightful ownership over how it is done. That combination gives the mind a reason to stay even when the day is hard. If your motivation has been unstable, there is a good chance one of these is weak. Maybe you have skill but no meaning, so you feel competent and empty. Maybe you have purpose but no freedom, so you feel committed and trapped. Maybe you are working hard on goals that impress people, but do not feel deeply yours. Maybe you are doing meaningful work in a structure that kills ownership. Either way, the fix is not more self-blame. The fix is to strengthen the missing lever. Write your mission more clearly. Do not let your work stay vague. Say what it serves. Say who it serves. Say what kind of person it is asking you to become. Then, reclaim a zone of decision. Redesign part of the process. Set your own standards. Create your own method. Protect your own agency where you can. Stop waiting for perfect freedom. Build real ownership in the space you have now. This is where drive becomes far more durable. Not because life suddenly gets easy, but because your effort is no longer floating. It is anchored. Anchored to meaning. Anchored to agency. Anchored to something deeper than fear and stronger than applause. That is why meaning and freedom change everything. They turn labor into chosen labor. They turn pressure into responsibility. They turn tasks into part of a mission. And once that shift happens, work stops feeling like a prison sentence you keep postponing. It starts feeling like a life you are actively building. Hold on to that. Guard it. Strengthen it. Work becomes easier to return to when it feels both meaningful and yours. Chapter 8. Find what is missing. You cannot fix what you have not named. You cannot rebuild drive while staying vague. That is where most people lose again. They feel flat, scattered, resistant, and tired, and then they throw one lazy label over the whole mess. They say they are unmotivated. They say they are inconsistent. They say they need to try harder, but those are not real diagnoses. Those are emotional summaries. They do not tell you what is weak. They do not tell you what to repair. They do not tell you where the leak is. And if you do not know where the leak is, you will keep pouring effort into the wrong place and calling it discipline. This is where you need to grow up in the way you look at your own mind. Stop judging the machine and start reading the dashboard. By now you know that durable drive is not one giant mystical force. It is built from 5 deeper motivators: curiosity, mastery, intrinsic enjoyment of the work, meaning, freedom. When one of them drops low enough, the whole experience of work changes. The same task can suddenly feel heavier, duller, more forced, more dead. Not because your character collapsed overnight, but because one of the inner supports has weakened. That changes everything. Because once you see motivation this way, you stop saying, "What is wrong with me?" and start asking what is missing here. That question is stronger, cleaner, more useful. It moves you out of self-attack and into diagnosis. It turns confusion into structure. That is the shift you need now. Not more guilt, more precision. So look at your work honestly. Do not perform insight. Do not pretend. Do not answer based on who you wish you were. Answer based on what is true in the room where the work actually happens. When you sit down to do the work, is your mind pulled in by curiosity, or does it feel dead on arrival? Do you feel a path of growth and mastery, or are you repeating effort without development? Is there anything in the activity itself that feels absorbing, or are you only living for a distant result? Does the work feel connected to something meaningful, or does it feel like empty output? Do you have any ownership in how the work is done, or does it feel imposed, controlled, and detached from your agency? These are not soft questions. These are structural questions. And your answers matter. Maybe your curiosity is weak. Maybe the work is too abstract, too stale, too disconnected from real discovery. Maybe your mind is not leaning in because there is nothing alive for it to chase. If that is true, stop calling yourself lazy. A mind that sees no signal will drift. That is not moral failure. That is design failure. Maybe mastery is weak. Maybe you are working hard but not getting better in a visible way. Maybe the challenge is too low and boring. Maybe the challenge is too high and crushing. Maybe you are doing too much performance and not enough practice. That matters, because the mind can endure strain when it feels progress, but it resists strain that feels flat and pointless. Maybe the work itself is not rewarding yet. Maybe you are attached to the dream, and detached from the doing. Maybe you love the identity, the outcome, the image, the future story. But you do not yet have enough bond with the central actions that fill the hours. That creates friction every single day. It means the path is fighting you at the level of process. Maybe meaning is weak. Maybe the work pays but does not speak. Maybe it keeps you busy but does not feel tied to a mission you respect. Maybe you have goals but not a deeper reason. And without that deeper reason, the work can start feeling thin. People can carry a lot, but they do not carry emptiness well. Maybe freedom is weak. Maybe the task itself is not the main problem. Maybe the real problem is that the work feels trapped, micromanaged, rigid, and not yours. Maybe you have responsibilities but no sense of ownership. Maybe you are showing up but not choosing enough. That matters because people fight harder for what they help shape. Do not rush this diagnosis. Sit with it. The truth you avoid here will cost you later. If you misread the missing part, you will fix the wrong thing, and then you will say the method does not work when the real problem is that you never looked clearly enough in the first place. Here is a simple way to do it. Score each motivator from 1 to 10 based on your real experience this week, not your ideals, not your best month 6 months ago. This week, curiosity, mastery, intrinsic enjoyment of the work, meaning, freedom. Then, look at the lowest number, not the highest, not the one you feel proud of, the weakest one. That weak point is not a side issue. It is probably your bottleneck. Then look at the highest number too. That is not random either. It often shows your natural energy zone. It shows where your system already comes alive with less forcing. That matters because the weakest score tells you what to repair, and the highest score tells you where your inner drive already has roots. This is where people make another mistake. They see one strong area and assume the whole system is healthy. It does not work like that. You can have strong purpose and still struggle because the work itself feels dead. You can have strong curiosity and still fade because you feel no autonomy. You can find intrinsic enjoyment in the work and still burn out because you are not growing. One strong motivator does not erase one critically weak one. A chain still breaks at its weakest point. Your drive is no different. You also need to accept that this diagnosis can change across seasons. What is low now may not have been low before. A person can begin a path with high curiosity and later need more mastery. Another can begin with strong purpose and later lose energy because autonomy gets crushed by structure. This is why mature people stop treating motivation like a fixed personality trait. It is dynamic. It moves. It rises and falls with design, context, skill, and season. That is not weakness. That is reality. Learn to read it. This chapter is not here to make you overthink yourself. It is here to end blurry suffering. It is here to replace emotional guessing with honest assessment. It is here to make one thing clear. You are not stuck with random motivation. You are dealing with a system, and systems can be examined. Once you know what is missing, you stop swinging in the dark. You stop blaming yourself in general. You stop trying to solve every problem with more pressure. You start acting like a builder. That is the new standard, not panic, not drama, not self-condemnation, diagnosis, clarity, precision. Find what is missing. Name it cleanly. Because the moment you can name the missing part, the work stops feeling like fog. It becomes a structure again, and once it becomes a structure, you can change it. Chapter 9. Fix the weakest part. First, now that you can see the missing part, you need discipline of a different kind. You need to stop trying to fix everything at once. That is one of the fastest ways to stay stuck. People discover that their motivation is unstable, and then they attack every weakness in one wild burst. They redesign their schedule, change their goals, buy new tools, make a new routine, chase more inspiration, read more advice, and promise themselves they will become a new person by Monday. Then the system becomes too heavy, too crowded, too vague, and too exhausting to hold. They burn through energy trying to improve all 5 motivators at once, and because the effort is scattered, the results stay weak. Then they quit and call themselves inconsistent again. Do not do that. That is not strategy. That is emotional overcorrection. The rule here is simple. Fix the weakest part first. Start where the system is breaking hardest. Start where the friction is highest. Start where the leak is largest. If curiosity is collapsing, do not begin by writing a grand mission statement and pretending that will solve the day-to-day deadness of the work. If mastery is missing, do not keep decorating your workspace and calling it progress. If autonomy is crushed, do not assume that more inspiration will remove the feeling of being trapped. Solve the real bottleneck first. This matters because motivation is not only additive, it is structural. One weak point can drag the rest down. A low-scoring motivator often creates secondary damage. When curiosity is low, attention weakens. When attention weakens, effort feels heavier. When effort feels heavier, love of the work drops. When that drops, consistency becomes harder. One weak part starts poisoning the whole experience. The same is true for mastery, meaning, and freedom. That is why fixing the weakest part first can create momentum far beyond that one area. You are not just repairing one piece. You are removing a drag force from the whole system. Think of it like this. You do not strengthen a body under load by training every muscle with equal urgency when one injury is throwing off the whole movement. You address the instability first. You restore function first. Then the rest can grow better. Your motivational system works the same way. Precision before intensity. Bottleneck before expansion. So take your lowest motivator and commit to repairing that first for a defined period. Not forever, just first. If curiosity is weakest, your work for the next phase is to make the work more mentally alive. That may mean shifting toward problems with leverage, shortening the gap between learning and application, giving yourself faster feedback, or choosing a more interesting entry point into the material. If mastery is weakest, your work is to build a clearer practice path. More drills, more measurement, more visible progress. If love of the work is weakest, your task is to examine the activity itself and increase contact with the parts that create engagement. If meaning is weakest, connect the work back to a larger mission. If freedom is weakest, reclaim a zone of ownership inside the structure you live in. This is not random self-help. This is targeted design. And targeted design changes more than mood ever will. You also need patience here. The weakest motivator is often weak for a reason. It may have been neglected for years. It may be buried under bad habits, poor structure, wrong assumptions, or old emotional associations with work. Do not expect one clever tweak to reverse everything overnight. The point is not instant perfection. The point is to create lift where there was drag. The point is to make the work less dead, less forced, less blurry, less trapped. Small structural gains matter. Small shifts in the weakest area can create real relief. This is where people miss the power of momentum. When the weakest part improves, the work starts feeling different. Not magical, different, slightly easier to enter, slightly easier to sustain, slightly less heavy to return to. That matters more than dramatic motivation spikes, because what you are building now is not hype. It is traction. Hype gets you one day. Traction gets you back tomorrow. You also have to resist the ego trap of fixing what you already like fixing. Many people say they want change, but they only work on the motivators that feel comfortable. They love thinking about purpose because it sounds noble, but avoid fixing mastery because measurement exposes weakness. Or they love redesigning their process because it feels productive, but avoid facing the fact that they do not care enough about the actual mission. That is avoidance in smarter clothing. Cut it out. Work where the truth points, not where your ego feels safer. Another mistake is assuming the weakest area is a sign that the whole path is wrong. Sometimes it is, but not always. Low autonomy does not always mean the mission is wrong. Low love of the work does not always mean you chose the wrong field. Sometimes the issue is not the road. It is the current design of the road. Do not burn down the whole structure before repairing the obvious weak point. Test intelligently first. This chapter is about order. Order matters. Sequence matters. Mature builders do not just work hard. They work in the right order. First the bottleneck, then the next gain, then the next correction. That is how systems stabilize. That is how motivation becomes less emotional and more dependable. So look again at your lowest score. Name it without drama. Accept it without shame. Then commit to repairing that lever before chasing 10 others. Stop flooding yourself with improvement goals. Stop trying to become perfect in one move. Choose the weakest part. Work there first. Build lift where you currently feel drag. Once the weakest part rises, the whole machine will breathe easier. And when the machine breathes easier, you stop feeling like you need to fight yourself every hour of the day. Fix the weakest part first. That is how real momentum begins. Chapter 10. Redesign your work, not your mood. This is the hinge chapter. This is where excuses end. This is where the whole book stops being an idea and becomes a method. You now know the truth. You are not lazy. You have been using the wrong fuel. You know the 5 motivators that create stronger inner drive. You know how to diagnose what is missing. Now you need to do the one thing that changes everything. Redesign your work, not your mood, not your personality, not your worth, your work. This is the part most people avoid because it demands responsibility without drama. They would rather keep hoping to feel better than build better conditions. They would rather wait for the right energy than create a structure that makes the right energy more likely. That is childish. Mood is unstable. Design is trainable. Mood comes and goes. Structure stays and shapes behavior. If you want durable drive, stop negotiating with your feelings all day. Start engineering the work so the best parts of you have a clearer path to appear. That is the whole shift. You are no longer just a worker trapped inside a fixed job, task, or routine. You are an architect of experience. The work may not be fully under your control, but your experience of the work is more changeable than you think. The way the work is framed, broken down, practiced, connected, and owned can all be redesigned. That is where your power is. Use it. Start with curiosity. If your mind is flat, do not just accuse it of weakness. Ask why the work has become mentally dead. Then, redesign for signal. Learn things with leverage. Work on questions that matter. Shorten the distance between input and application. When you learn something, use it quickly. Test it. Build with it. Let your brain see that attention leads to consequence. Curiosity rises when work contains discovery and feedback. So create more of both. Make the task less abstract. Make the lesson more immediate. Make the problem more real. A mind that sees no living edge will drift. A mind that senses discovery will lean in. Now mastery. If effort feels flat, redesign around growth. Choose a skill with a high ceiling, then break it down into smaller drills. Stop calling repetition practice when it has no target. Practice with intention. Measure something. Track something. Make progress visible. Set the challenge high enough to wake you up, but not so high that it crushes you into helplessness. Growth needs tension, but it also needs attainability. If the task is too easy, boredom wins. If it is too hard, panic wins. So adjust the balance. Build a ladder, not a wall. When you can feel yourself getting better, effort becomes easier to respect. Now, love of the work. This is where honesty matters. Which parts of the work absorb you most deeply? Which parts put you in strongest contact with your strengths? Which actions make time move faster because you are fully inside the process? Increase those where you can. Move closer to the core activity that creates genuine engagement. Reduce unnecessary dead weight where possible. This does not mean doing only what is easy. It means designing your role and your rhythm so that the central actions of the path become more present in your day. The more your real work aligns with what you can gradually bond with, the less. Every day feels like forced labor. Now, meaning. Write your mission clearly. Do not let the work stay small in your mind. Tie daily tasks to a larger contribution. Tie boring repetition to the life you are building, the service you are giving, the standard. You are protecting the future you refuse to waste. Purpose is not decoration. It is psychological lift. It reminds you why the effort matters when the task itself is not glamorous. Small tasks become easier to carry when they are connected to a larger identity and a larger responsibility. Say it clearly. This work matters because it is building this. This effort matters because it serves this. Give your labor a reason stronger than convenience. Now, freedom. Even inside constraint, you must reclaim agency. Design your own process where you can. Choose your sequence. Choose your standards. Choose your method. Choose the rules that help you work cleanly. Create zones of self-direction. If the entire experience of work feels imposed from the outside, motivation will stay fragile. So stop surrendering every inch of ownership. Take back decisions where you can. Even small autonomy matters. A person works differently when they can say, "This is how I do it. This is the standard I choose. This is the way I carry it." Ownership changes the emotional quality of effort. Do you see what is happening now? You are not begging your mind to cooperate. You are giving it better conditions. You are not trying to become someone who can tolerate dead work forever. You are making the work less dead. You are not whipping yourself into fake intensity. You are building a structure that creates more pull, more growth, more engagement, more meaning, and more ownership. That is the path, not endless self-criticism. Intelligent redesign. And let me make this sharper. Do not redesign your work to make you softer. Redesign your work to make your strength easier to access. This is not about comfort. It is about alignment. A better designed task can still be difficult. A meaningful practice can still be demanding. A high-growth challenge can still stretch you hard. But difficulty is not the enemy. Pointless friction is. Dead friction is. Misaligned friction is. Remove what kills clean effort. Keep what builds you. That is why this chapter matters more than almost any other. It replaces the old script with a new one. The old script says, I need to change myself until I can survive this better. The new script says I need to change the structure so the right version of me can show up more often. That is not weakness, that is intelligence. High performers do this all the time. They do not trust raw mood. They build systems, environments, methods, and practices that make good work more likely. So stop staring at your feelings and calling that self-awareness. Real self-awareness leads to design. Real responsibility leads to redesign. Ask better questions. How can this task create faster feedback? How can this skill be broken into sharper drills? How can I spend more time in the part of the work that creates true engagement? How can I tie this week more clearly to mission? Where can I reclaim ownership right now? Those questions build a stronger life. Those questions turn motivation from a mystery into a craft. This is the point where you stop being a victim of inspiration. This is the point where you stop waiting to feel like doing hard things before you start doing them. This is the point where you become a builder of conditions, a designer of process, an architect of drive. And once you begin living that way, the whole experience of work starts to change. It gets cleaner, stronger, more honest, less forced, more alive. Do not waste this shift. Use it. Redesign your work, not your mood. That is how the best in you stops appearing by accident and starts appearing by design. Chapter 11. How flow starts flow is not magic. It is not a rare blessing reserved for gifted people. It is not a mysterious mood that visits a few lucky hours and then disappears for reasons no one can explain. You need to stop thinking about it that way. That belief keeps you passive. It keeps you waiting. It keeps you acting as if your best states are accidents. They are not. Flow is a logical result. It appears more often when your inner fuel is strong and your work is designed well. That is the truth. Flow begins when the fight between you and the work starts to quiet down. It begins when attention is no longer being dragged in 10 directions. It begins when the work becomes clear enough, meaningful enough, engaging enough, challenging enough, and owned enough that your mind stops trying to escape it and starts entering it fully. That is why this chapter matters. You need to understand that flow does not fall from the sky. It grows out of conditions. It grows out of structure. It grows out of a motivational system that has been built with intelligence instead of left to chance. You already know the 5 forces now. Curiosity pulls your attention in. Mastery gives your effort direction and a challenge worth meeting. Love of the work makes the process itself more alive. Meaning gives the work weight. Freedom gives the work ownership. Put those together and something changes. The work stops feeling like a wall you have to crash into every day. It starts feeling like a field you can step into. That is where flow begins. It is the state where you are deeply inside the task. Time starts losing its hard edges. You are still exerting effort, sometimes a lot of effort, but the heaviness changes. You are no longer carrying the same internal argument. You are no longer forcing every second through resistance. The mind and the task begin to lock together. That is why flow feels powerful. Not because the work becomes easy, but because friction drops. You stop burning so much energy on hesitation, self-negotiation, distraction, and emotional drag. All that wasted motion gets reduced. More of your energy goes into the work itself. That is why performance rises. That is why the experience feels so clean. And that is why people who taste flow want it again. But do not distort this. Flow is not constant. It is not supposed to be. No serious person lives in perfect absorption every hour. There are still set-up phases. There are still rough entries. There are still difficult days. There are still moments when the mind resists. Stop expecting permanent perfection. That expectation will only make you frustrated and blind. The point is not to live in flow all day, every day. The point is to make flow more available, more frequent, more reachable, more likely. That is what good design does. If your work is dead shallow, meaningless, badly matched to your skill level and stripped of ownership, flow will stay rare. Of course it will. Why would your mind want to sink fully into something that gives it no real reason to stay? But when the work starts to contain real curiosity, visible growth, real engagement, deeper purpose, and chosen responsibility, the odds change. Your mind stops treating work like an enemy. It starts seeing it as a place where it can become fully present. That is the shift. Flow also matters for a deeper reason. It does not just help you get more done. It changes the feeling of being alive inside your effort. There is a major difference between dragging yourself through your days and entering them with full absorption. One feels like survival. The other feels like participation. One makes life feel heavy and divided. The other makes life feel integrated. That is why flow feels so good. Not because it is a pleasure trick, but because it feels like your energies are finally moving in one direction at once. You are not split. You are not scattered. You are not bargaining every few minutes. You are there. Fully there. That experience is not small. It reminds you what work can feel like when your mind is not constantly fighting itself. So stop treating flow like luck. Stop using it as an excuse to stay confused. If you want more flow, do not ask how to chase the feeling directly. Ask how to strengthen the structure that makes the feeling possible. Build the right fuel. Build the right challenge. Build the right engagement. Build the right meaning. Build the right ownership. Do that and flow stops being a fantasy. It becomes a pattern, not perfect, not constant, but real. And once you understand that you stop waiting for your best state to appear by accident, you begin creating the conditions that invite it in. Chapter 12. The Upward Spiral. Now you need to understand the deeper payoff. Flow is not only a result, it is also a force. This is where the whole system becomes far stronger than most people realize. Intrinsic motivation helps you enter flow more often. Then flow feeds intrinsic motivation back in return. That is the upward spiral. That is the virtuous cycle. That is why the strongest drive does not come from one dramatic burst of willpower. It comes from a loop that keeps strengthening itself over time. You need to see this clearly because this is one of the most important truths in the entire book. At first, you use design to make the work more alive. You raise curiosity. You build mastery. You deepen your love of the work. You clarify meaning. You reclaim freedom. That makes focus stronger. That lowers friction. That increases the chance of entering flow. Good. But once flow starts happening more often, something else happens. The work becomes even more rewarding from the inside. Your brain starts associating the work with immersion, progress, energy, and aliveness instead of only with strain. That matters. It matters a lot. Because now the work is no longer only something you must push yourself into. It is becoming something your system increasingly wants to return to. That is a major shift. This is the point where the wheel starts helping turn itself. Before this, you were pushing hard just to get movement. Now, movement itself starts generating momentum. Before this, you were using intention to create better work. Now, better work starts creating stronger intention. That is the upward spiral. Intrinsic motivation leads to flow. Flow strengthens intrinsic motivation. Stronger intrinsic motivation makes flow easier to enter again. The cycle keeps feeding itself. That is how drive becomes more stable over time. Not because you become superhuman, not because you become permanently excited, but because your system is no longer living on one-way effort alone. It is being reinforced from within. Think about what this means in practical terms. If work gives you curiosity, growth, engagement, meaning, and ownership, you enter it with more willingness. If you then experience flow, the task feels even more worth returning to. The next day, resistance is lower. Attention comes faster. The emotional cost of starting drops. Then you get another strong session. That session strengthens the bond again. Over weeks and months, this compounds. The drive becomes less fragile, less dependent on perfect mornings, less dependent on external pressure, less dependent on praise, fear, or panic. This is why some people seem almost unstoppable. It is not always because they are tougher in the crude sense. It is often because they have built a self-feeding system. They are being carried by an upward spiral that weaker systems never create. This is also why you need patience. The spiral does not appear in one dramatic afternoon. It builds. It compounds. It grows through repeated contact with the right kind of work. Many people quit too early because they still expect instant transformation. They redesign the work a little. Have 2 better days, then one difficult day comes and they conclude nothing changed. That is immature thinking. A real system should be judged across patterns, not moments. The upward spiral becomes visible over time. First, the work feels slightly less dead. Then slightly easier to enter, then slightly more rewarding, then focus gets cleaner, then flow appears more often, then the work starts pulling you back more naturally. Then the whole thing begins to feel less like constant self-enforcement and more like a strengthening cycle. That is how it grows, step by step, layer by layer. There is another important correction here. Durability does not come from being the best at forcing yourself forever. That is the old fantasy. That is the old ego story. The truth is stronger than that. The most durable people are not always the ones who can whip themselves the hardest. They are the ones who build a loop that keeps feeding energy back into the system. They do not just endure, they engineer. They do not just grind. They create conditions that make returning easier. That is why they can stay in the game for years while others burn out from dramatic bursts and repeated collapse. So change the way you define strength. Strength is not only the ability to override yourself. Strength is the ability to build a life where your best effort has internal support. Strength is the ability to create a system that gives back while you are still walking through it. Strength is the ability to make deep work increasingly self-reinforcing. That is what the upward spiral does. It turns work from repeated extraction into repeated investment. It turns discipline from a constant emergency into a compounding structure. It turns motivation from a temporary spike into something that can grow roots. Do not miss the importance of that. A rooted drive will always outlast a dramatic one. So stop admiring raw force alone. Start respecting systems that feed themselves. Start building the kind of work that returns energy while it demands energy. Start stacking sessions that make tomorrow easier to enter than today. That is the path. That is the loop. That is the upward spiral. And the people who build it are not the people who only work hard once. They are the people who make hard work easier to return to year after year. Chapter 13. From forcing yourself to wanting it. This is the emotional payoff you have been moving toward from the beginning. You started with a life that felt like dragging your mind, dragging your focus, dragging your body, dragging yourself toward work you knew mattered but did not know how to enter cleanly. Everything felt like a negotiation. Every session required a push. Every action needed a trick, a threat, a deadline, a guilt spike, a fear spike, or a fantasy about the result. That is how many people live. They call it discipline, but much of the time it is just repeated internal conflict. The day starts and the first battle begins. Then another, then another. They keep trying to pull themselves into motion, and by the end of the day, they are not only tired from the work, they are tired from the forcing. That is the old state. You need to remember it clearly because you need to see how big the shift really is. The new state is not that you feel joyful every hour. Throw that childish fantasy away. The new state is not that hard, things stop being hard. The new state is not endless excitement. The real shift is deeper and stronger. The real shift is that the work starts having pull. You begin wanting to return. You begin feeling a cleaner readiness. You begin sensing that a good day of work is not only something you should do, it is something you actually want to step into. That changes everything. Because once the work becomes a place you want to return to, the emotional weight of your days changes. You stop needing to drag yourself across the starting line every single time. The beginning gets lighter. The return gets faster. The resistance loses some of its grip. You still need standards. You still need discipline. You still need to hold the line on hard days. But now, discipline is no longer doing all the work alone. It has help. It has pull. It has structure. It has inner reward. That is the difference between always forcing yourself and increasingly wanting it. This is the promise you were really after, even if you did not have the words for it before. You did not just want better productivity. You wanted a different relationship with work. You wanted to stop feeling like every important action required violence against yourself. You wanted to wake up feeling more ready, more willing, more aligned, more eager to enter the kind of effort that builds a real life. That desire is not naive. It is possible. Not by waiting for inspiration, but by building the right fuel. When curiosity rises, your mind wants to know more. When mastery rises, your mind wants to get better. When love of the work rises, the process itself becomes more alive. When meaning rises, your effort feels worth carrying. When freedom rises, your effort feels more like a chosen path than an imposed burden. Put that together and the entire emotional texture of work changes. Work stops being only duty. It becomes a place where growth, engagement, purpose, and ownership meet. No wonder you start wanting to return. No wonder the work begins to call you forward. That is not weakness. That is not indulgence. That is intelligent design paying off. Many people have never experienced this enough to trust it. They think all serious work must always feel like self-denial. They think wanting the work would somehow make them soft. They are wrong. Wanting the work is not softness when the work is difficult, meaningful, and growth-producing. It is one of the strongest positions you can build, because now you are not only surviving the road, you are participating in it. You are not only obeying your standards, you are being pulled by something inside the path itself. That gives you durability that raw pressure can never produce. This is also where your self-image changes. The old self was someone who had to be managed like a problem every day. The new self becomes someone who can trust the system more. someone who knows how to create return, someone who no longer panics every time motivation dips because they understand the mechanics underneath it, someone who has proof that hard work does not always have to feel like dragging dead weight uphill. That proof matters. It rebuilds confidence. Not empty confidence, earned confidence, the kind that comes from seeing your own system respond to better design. So let this sink in. The greatest transformation here is not that you become a machine. It is that you stop living as a divided person. You stop being one self who wants the future and another self who keeps sabotaging the path. The gap begins to close. The work becomes more unified with the life you actually want to live. That is why the emotional experience shifts from forcing to wanting. It is not because difficulty vanished. It is because alignment grew. And alignment is powerful. It reduces friction. It increases readiness. It gives your best self a cleaner way to appear. That is the state you are building toward. Not endless hype, not endless comfort. A stronger inner pull, a better bond with the work, a life where difficult effort becomes easier to begin and easier to return to. Hold on to that picture. Fight for that version of your working life. Because once you taste the difference between dragging yourself and truly wanting to enter the work, you will never again want to go back to living only on pressure, guilt, and force. You will see the truth. The strongest drive is not the one that shouts the loudest. It is the one that keeps calling you back. Chapter 14. When external rewards lose power. This is one of the clearest signs that you are changing at the root. External rewards begin to lose power over you. Not because money becomes useless, not because results stop mattering, not because recognition suddenly turns evil. That is not the point. The point is that these things stop controlling your nervous system. They stop holding your focus by the throat. They stop deciding whether you show up, how hard you work, and how much peace you are allowed to feel. That is maturity, real maturity. At the start, you lived too close to the outside world. You worked harder when people noticed. You moved faster when pressure rose. You felt more alive when approval came. You panicked when it disappeared. That is how unstable motivation works. It ties your inner life to signals you do not fully control. But once intrinsic motivation gets stronger, something important happens. The outside world does not disappear. It just loses its old authority. You can still want success. You can still care about progress. You can still enjoy being rewarded. But the reward is no longer the master. It is no longer the engine. It is no longer the thing that has to arrive before you can work with force. That changes everything. Because the moment external rewards lose some of their grip, you become harder to manipulate, harder to distract, harder to break. You stop asking every 5 minutes, "What will I get?" "Who will notice? How do I look?" "Am I ahead yet?" And you start asking better questions. Is the work strong? Am I growing? Does this matter? Am I building something real? That shift is freedom, deep freedom. You can still appreciate the reward without worshiping it. You can still chase excellence without becoming a slave to outcome. The old self worked to be seen. The stronger self works because the work itself has value. The old self needed results to feel stable. The stronger self becomes more stable first, then keeps working toward results from a cleaner place. That does not make you passive. It makes you dangerous in the right way. Because when external rewards lose power, your consistency becomes less fragile. You no longer need the world to clap before you move. You no longer need panic before you focus. You no longer need comparison before you care. You can act from standards instead of signals. You can act from purpose instead of pressure. You can act from inner pull instead of public noise. Guard that shift. The outside world will keep offering vanity distraction, false urgency, and the hunger to be approved. Do not bow to that. Let success be a byproduct. Let money be a tool. Let recognition be a side effect. But do not let any of them become your master again. Real freedom is not having no ambition. Real freedom is no longer being dragged around by rewards that live outside you. That is when your drive becomes cleaner. That is when your work becomes stronger. That is when you begin living from the inside out, not from the outside in. Chapter 15. The Zen Warrior Way. Now the final identity begins to appear. Not a machine. Not a monk who has quit the world. Not a performer addicted to applause. Something better, something rarer. The Zen warrior. You need to understand what this means because this is the spiritual center of the whole book. It means you stop living inside the false choice between ambition and peace. You stop believing you must either detach from effort to protect your inner life or attach yourself to rewards so hard that you lose your inner life completely. Both paths are incomplete. One goes soft, the other goes hollow. The stronger path is different. You become detached from external rewards while fiercely engaged with the work itself. That is the Zen warrior way, the detachment of a monk, the engagement of a warrior. Calm inside, intense in action, free from external traps, fully committed to the mission. This person still cares deeply, still trains, still builds, still fights for excellence, still carries standards, still pushes hard, but they are no longer owned by money. Applause, titles, image, or public approval. Their center lives deeper than that. This is not just another tactic. It is a way of being, a new identity, a new posture toward work and life, mastery over money, purpose over position, love of the work over applause, curiosity over conformity, autonomy over approval. These are not abstract ideas. These are daily choices, daily tests, daily proofs of who you are becoming. The Zen warrior is not numb. This is not cold withdrawal. This is a live, disciplined engagement. You still bring force. You still bring devotion. You still bring seriousness. But now your force is cleaner because it is not chained to vanity. Your devotion is cleaner because it is not begging to be seen. Your seriousness is cleaner because it is not built on fear of losing status. That makes you durable. It makes you harder to shake when public opinion turns. It makes you harder to break when progress is slow. It makes you harder to poison yourself with comparison. You become the kind of person who can stay deep with the work because the work itself has become worthy of your life. That is the identity that can survive the long road. Inner freedom, outer intensity, calm standards, fierce execution. If you build this identity, you become very hard to stop, because now the world has fewer hooks in you. It can offer rewards, but it cannot lead you by them. It can withhold praise, but it cannot starve you by it. It can misunderstand you, delay you, ignore you, even doubt you, and still you keep building. That is power, real power. Not just successful, not just productive, free inside and sharp in action. A warrior without inner chaos. A builder without spiritual dependence on applause. A person who can want excellence without worshipping reward. Remember that. Train toward that. The end of this book is not just that you work better, it is that you become a different kind of person. Chapter 16. how to get your drive back again and again. Now we finish the right way. Not with hype, not with one final speech that makes you feel invincible for 20 minutes and leaves you empty tomorrow. We finish with a mechanism. We finish with a way back. Because real maturity is not never drifting. Real maturity is knowing how to return. You need this chapter because your motivation will not stay perfectly balanced forever. Nobody's does. No one lives in full flow all the time. No one keeps all 5 motivators strong in every season. Life changes, work changes, stress changes, skill changes, meaning shifts, freedom rises and falls. This is normal. Do not turn normal fluctuation into a personal indictment. Do not make one low day mean a broken identity. Cut that out. The stronger response is simpler. When drive drops, do not panic. Diagnose. When the work feels heavier again, do not start insulting yourself. Check the system. When focus weakens, do not rush to call yourself lazy. Go back to the dashboard. That is the power you have now. You are no longer stuck with random suffering. You have a framework. You have a language. You have levers. Use them. Ask the real question. Which motivator dropped? Is curiosity low because the work has gone mentally dead? Is mastery low because growth has become blurry and flat? Has your love of the work weakened because you drifted too far from the core activity that creates engagement? Is meaning low because the mission has become vague? Is freedom low because the work feels trapped, imposed, or no longer yours? Find the weak point, name it, then correct it. That is how adults recover, not by drama, by design. This is what makes your drive durable, not permanent intensity, recoverability, not a life with no dips, a life where dips do not own you for long. That is stronger. The old you saw a drop in motivation and assumed failure. The stronger you sees a drop and runs a check. The old you thought something was wrong with your character. The stronger you asks which part of the system needs repair. The old you made the bad day mean the whole path was fake. The stronger you course corrects and gets back to work. That is the final freedom this book wants to give you. You do not need a life where you never slip. You need a method that brings you back faster every time you do. So use it. When motivation drops, pause. Score the 5 motivators again. Find the weak one. Repair that one first. Redesign the work where needed. Reconnect to meaning where needed. Reclaim ownership where needed. Rebuild the challenge where needed. Bring curiosity back where needed. Then return. Return without shame. Return without theater. Return without waiting for perfect emotion. Return because that is what strong people do. They do not stay lost any longer than necessary. Let this be the final thing you remember. You are not lazy. You are not broken. You do not need to live at the mercy of mood. You need the right fuel, the right design, and the discipline to recalibrate when the system drifts. That is the ending worth keeping, not a temporary high, a repeatable return.